Patrick, you've been a filmmaker for 15 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was it everything you thought it would be?
Well, you know, there's lots of sides to that question. No one ever goes in expecting the amount of stress that comes with it. But I think the reason that is because people overlook the idea of management. When you go in to make your own movie, as a director, you're managing all the personalities on set. So you're managing everybody that's going to come into this. And I think we have a fantastical idea of what that would look like directing a movie. And the reality of it is you really got to decide if you're going to put the camera here or a half inch there, and everything has to be shifted one way or the other. So with that said, it's completely different than what I expected, but there's nothing else in the world that keeps my interest, like all the different levels of making a film, as far as like writing and shooting and editing and how different all of those are from one another.
Was it easier, or I should say, is it easier or more difficult than you anticipated?
Making movies? Mm-hmm. Well, on April 23rd, 2006, that was the day I devoted my life to cinema. I told a friend of mine a dream I had, and he responded with, "You should make movies," and something clicked in my head. And at that particular time, I was skateboarding a lot and kind of going the sponsored skateboarder route. And so when I first started making movies for the first 5 or 6 years, I only viewed it like skateboarding. Like taking people, sneaking into a location, filming something, and then running away. And I would make these films and show my family members them every holiday, but I didn't know about film festivals. I didn't know about, it could be a living or anything of that sort. I feel like throughout the time you're making stuff, you start to hear these little nuggets of, oh, that's pretty good, or oh, this, and it kind of builds into something. So in terms of what I thought it was gonna be making films, I think the big changing block for me was realizing that it is a viable option to make a career out of, and kind of crazy that the road I was on led that path. I don't know. Because I was making all these things that just were, I don't know, I had no idea what it was. And then suddenly it became something where you can make movies, and then I learned what the budgets were and that they could be millions, and that's strange. But
you had said earlier that the managing people or whatever, and that is such a big part of anything in film. Did you realize it would be maybe harder? Because people are sensitive, actors are sensitive, crew members are sensitive. Maybe they don't give that off when you first meet them, but people, we all have our little space, and we bump up against each other, and things will happen on set. And maybe we don't, it's a little pressure cooker, as we've had a former guest say. Yeah, that was a great analogy. Yeah. Did you think it would be easy to manage people? Did you think, oh, we're all creating art, man, this is going to be cool, no one's going to have any issue here?
Well, here's the issue with where I'm coming from with it. I've been wearing so many hats on all these movies that when I'm in the middle of the process, the managing of people's expectations and their time, I think when they see me running full speed, drenched in sweat, everybody's like, follow him, let's go. And so I haven't had a lot of moments where I've had to worry about how people were viewing it. Because, again, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. So in Cincinnati, I think the neighborhood that I was making films in, a lot of people had fun doing it together. And so that passion and fun, why we made these pictures, I think it translates later to, hopefully now when I'm bringing people together here and people are getting paid, that maybe there's a different feeling, because it doesn't really change as you're making things. I feel like the kind of bubble you build in the beginning continues to be that bubble, except for sometimes when money is entered into the picture, there's a little bit more pressure.
And ultimately, the person at the top sets the tone. You seem upbeat to me. So they say, forgive my analogy here, but things roll downhill. We'll clean it up a little bit. So if it's positive, then whatever rolls down will be of a good thing.
Filmmaking taught me to be incredibly positive. And here's the kind of stuff that I bounced off of. For instance, I was making my first feature-length movie, but at that time I didn't even know what a feature-length movie was. I just decided I was going to take one actor and just work with them over a long period of time to make something long. In the middle of that, I was supposed to use a gas station bathroom. And I had about 6 or 7 people waiting for me, crew members, some actors, outside in the parking lot. I walked in and talked to the manager, and the manager's like, no, you can't use this bathroom anymore. And instead of going to tell a single person about it, I ran across the street to a different gas station and then secured this other bathroom, and then came back and said, we're going over here. And no one ever knew that the issue happened. And so I think a huge part of this is, obviously we all know it's problem solving, but falling in love with problem solving. That's, to me, what filmmaking is. You know, really like embracing that there is going to be something that's not gonna go right and get excited by it. And I think so over the years, especially making movies with no money, because I made 2 features and a bunch of other shorts with no financing behind them except for less paying for gas and food, you have to be incredibly creative and to get those projects done. So then when the money enters the picture, in my mind, I am hoping you can still stay in the realm of we're making this piece of art, but then also understanding you're also making product and people need to get their money back or you're not going to keep doing this. So it is a kind of transformation into your vision and the color red or blue or how the poster should appeal to the eye. But I love working with poster designers, so that's all fun.
I like that though. So basically, if you had a bumper sticker, it would be "I love problem solving" in terms of for making movies, because that's basically what it's going to become. Like Murphy's Law, if a location's set, there could be a chance it'll fall out. An actor might not show. Different things could happen.
100%. I really believe the theoretical idea that if you point the camera at a subject long enough, something is going to transpire. When I first was making films, or like just adventuring the juxtaposition of images in the editorial, I would go down the street corner on Clifton Avenue in Ludlow in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'd set my camera up and I'd film for 30 or 40 minutes, just the street corner and cars and people going. I'd go home and I'd watch it. Just kind of curious, is there some kind of poetry in certain moments? And there really are. There really are in movement. And I really think what we love about videos and cinema and all of it together is it's a time capsule for the human body. If you look at Jack Nicholson from the very beginning of his movies all the way up to present, you've got this human being. And for him specifically, it's a time capsule of his emotions because they're all a diary entry. I'm sure he remembers when he watches something exactly what was going on at that time. So it's interesting because there's so much going on in cinema in that way. And you know, the theoretical idea of 1 + 1 = 3, where one image cut with another image creates a whole different image in the human psyche, that's happening regardless if you understand it or not. So trying to embrace that notion is quite exciting.
Were you almost trying to recreate Slacker in some way? You know, that just walking down the street and the different interactions, or that had nothing to do with it?
That had nothing to do with filming the street corner. That was just me wondering, you know, at that particular time I was reading a book on directing and they were talking about directing background actors and background stuff. And I just kind of started thinking to myself, well, it doesn't take much time for me to go film the street corner for 30 minutes. Like, I wonder what that looks like. And that's like the most realistic depiction you're ever going to get of a street corner. And so that's what that was. But I was in the neighborhood in Clifton. I was known as the guy making films. So I would carry my camera. I had a Canon XL2 in the beginning, and I would carry it around on my tripod. I'd go into the US Bank. They let me film a scene right at the teller without paying for anything, of not even shutting down the institution. They just let me set up my camera and film. But that's because I just ran around and filmed all the time. Again, that was just my favorite pastime, was filming and making things. And then obviously it just keeps getting bigger. You keep saying to yourself, well, now I did this. What could I do next? You know.
So you caught these different moments on film, and I know you have I don't know if this is one you caught on film, but you were at a restaurant and you saw what you thought was a loving mother and daughter together, and it turned out it wasn't that?
Oh, no. I know what you're referring here. For Willow's Peach, the idea of behind that. I was driving in a car by myself down the road from buying some movies, and I was just contemplating stories and characters, and out of nowhere I said to myself, well, are you coming or aren't you? And instantly I just knew it was a mother saying it to a daughter in my head, but I knew that that wasn't really her mother and that she was taking this child. But in my head, I saw this classic image of the angry mother, like, come on, let's go. And so we went into that path of making that movie. But
how one scene you could see, you think it's just a regular interaction, and it turns out it's much more darker in nature.
Hopefully, you know, one thing I love in cinema that Christopher Nolan does is he'll take these opening images that have one meaning, and then when you watch the film a second time, they have a second meaning. And a lot of his images have these dual meanings in them. And his belief, if I'm not mistaken, from what I've understood watching some of his interviews and stuff of that sort, is that creates rewatch value. The more you embody in the picture different layers of what something could mean, then the more that picture, I think, could, you know, give an audience member a lot to look at multiple viewings. And that's what we always get from his movies, Christopher Nolan's movies. So then the question lies, how do you do that? And I think that just is prepping the script, going over it 1,000 times, thinking about, you know, if you're writing the screenplay, what story are you telling and from what point of view, and yeah, and how do images even work with the mind? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're choosing. Every time you choose a lens versus camera placement. Like if I wanted you to feel vulnerable, maybe I would put the camera on a very wide angle lens and put the camera right up against your face and have you do the scene, and it might make you feel more vulnerable at that moment. Or if I want you to feel more secure, maybe I put the camera on a very long lens, like the Safdie brothers in Uncut Gems when they're filming Adam Sandler getting knocked into the fountain from across a block on an 800 millimeter lens, and Adam has no idea where they're filming from. So I feel like all of those choices are so important to making the piece. But
I think you have a theory that I find interesting. You must navigate from where you are, not from where you wish to be.
yeah, that's right.
How does that guide your life, and how does that guide filmmaking?
Let's see. I was 23 years old when my dad told me you have to navigate from where you are, not from where you wish to be. And he was studying Buddhism at the time. And what that really is translating to you is the idea that you will feel like you're someplace else, but your feet are firmly placed in a different position. So a lot of times, and at the time for me specifically, for instance, in terms of my filmmaking, I was making movies and maybe was viewing these movies on a higher scale than they needed to be viewed, and not planting my feet into the position of, it's amazing I'm getting these films finished, but now I need to navigate into what is telling a story. You know, because I think in the beginning of making a movie, you find yourself in the position of, how do you write a script? And then you write the script. And you're like, okay, well, now how do I translate that to in front of the camera? And you start to answer those questions. And I believe at some point, it suddenly becomes, okay, now I know how to make a movie, period. I know all the different departments. So how do you make a good movie? You know, how do you make something compelling? How do you make somebody feel emotion? And then how do you surprise? And I feel like where I've landed today that I'm really excited about is, now that I've made 3 features and 36 shorts, there's this point when I'm writing that I'm like, okay, I know the actor's gonna get this screenplay from me. So are there 3 or 4 scenes I can change in their script that they don't know what's gonna actually happen? And that's what I'm doing in these new movies coming up. Is there's certain scenes I will intentionally not tell them the way it's gonna go, just to see if theoretically they become, it's not all about surprising someone either. It can just be about freshening up a character choice at a particular moment. But
If we took that moment where your dad told you that, let's suppose that was a scene in a movie, was this about filmmaking that he told you this?
yes.
Oh, it was, okay.
It was. Everything, I'm very tunnel visioned. So when April 23rd came around and my roommate told me, and I devoted my life to making movies, nothing else mattered. Everything was making movies. I watched a billion movies. I read a billion screenplays. I read every book I could get my hands on. The first couple of years, I didn't have any technology. I had a VHS player and a television, and then I had this really old computer, like a desktop blocky computer from my dad, and I just started writing. I was a horrible student, and I just started writing and writing and writing, and my dad was reading these horrible scripts that I was writing, and he's like, I can't believe you're doing this much, here, let me get you a camera. And he got me a little camera, and then I started doing these little films where it's just me playing every role and cutting them together in the camera. And then that translated to getting the Canon XL2, and it started going that path. And then my dad, I would just get into these giant fantasy worlds, to bring it back to the Buddhist statement of you have to navigate from where you are, not from where you wish to be. He would just always be teaching me that and telling me, I'd talk about wanting to make these larger pieces, and he would tell me, navigate from where you are right here and you'll be able to. And then that thought process is also completing every project. I really thoroughly believe the reason most people don't get to where they want to go is because they never complete the thing they started. And that's the most important part of all of this. Even if in the middle you're like, this is bad, finish it and then show it. And there's probably going to be some people that actually like it. And that'll be surprising.
Would you print these scripts out, or would you just keep them was it a floppy disk or no?
No,
Maybe that was
I did print them out. I don't think I ever kept them backed up, but there was one feature-length script that was maybe 84 pages called One Day, and it was a crazy acid trip of a screenplay, and my friend, who was deep, deep lover of novels, came over and read it. The worst first person you can imagine to read something you've ever written. He sat down, the worst person because he's going to tell you the truth. And he sat down, he read the whole thing. He sat it down, said, this is a hunk of crap. But let me tell you, I'm impressed you finished. And it was such a big moment for me. I don't even think he even realized it at the particular time, because just that little bit of motivation of like, well, I did finish that thing, and then kept going. I got to the point where I wanted to do this so badly, I retaught myself grammar just so that I could get a brush up on anything I was messing up in the screenplay form, whether it was the actual structure or, the simple grammar of life.
Like passive voice versus active?
Oh, I mean, all those kind of things. How to use a comma. I mean, just particular moments you're writing 5 or 10 pages in a day, and you always miss these things anyways, so just trying to get better constantly in whatever facet. But at that time I was in Cincinnati, where apartments were $610 a month, and trying to move across the country was not existent, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that he kind of told you he not kind of told you the truth. He did tell you the truth. Mm-hmm. But then he could have just said, give up, man. This is, but he didn't. And so. As
many do. The first 5 or 8 years of making movies, most people would be like, what are you trying to do? And you'd almost feel weird to say I'm a filmmaker. Like, I feel like during that particular time, especially being from Ohio, I think the majority of people, they want to do something that they don't push themselves fully to do. And so you do get a lot of people, when you start to have passion and feel the stuff you feel, people sometimes push against you in particular ways. And navigating that is just as important as navigating the compliments. Meaning, when people give you compliments, they can be just as damaging as the negativity.
Really? Because they're yes people?
Well, not even so much that they're yes people, but don't get in your head. You can always be better. Like you might be better than the 10 people next to you, but there's always going to be, and forget about all the people, be better for you. Trying to be your best self is pretty much the only thing that we're here to do, I think. So if you want to make films, then try to make films better than you can ever make them. Hence me trying to relearn grammar and those kind of facets, just to be that much better if you could. But
how did you relearn it?
Videos, books, just buying things. I used to wake up at 4:30 in the morning most days, and I would sit there and work on whatever it was I was trying to better my screenplay writing. For instance, it might be like 4:30 in the morning, opening an actual class book to look at grammar and structure and And then it might be other mornings, it might be like opening specific kinds of writing and reading them and then writing your own little essays about what you think about those. Because screenwriting is an open canvas. And the context that Wes Anderson is writing scripts that are so novelesque, every detail is in there. So you can go to the degree that you could write a novel and then just put the dialogue in the middle, which is what they kind of do, and their films are amazing. Wes Anderson and the people he writes with generally. Or you can go Paul Thomas Anderson and it's completely gutted of a lot of that detail, and it's mainly some basic camera movements, and then the dialogue is all the character and the depth in it. So what a huge versatile of difference in the idea of how you're going to write something and how do you navigate it. Because, you know, but really I think how you navigate it is find out who you are and then write.
Did you ever experience that where you, because you know they say that a lot of would-be authors do that, where they start writing in the same style, same voice as the author that they read so much? Did you find that with any of the films that you were watching? Let's suppose if you watched all of David Fincher's films or whomever, that you like, you know what, I think I'm copying this person's style?
Yeah, I intentionally copied David Lynch for the first 10 short films.
That's not a bad person to copy.
I intentionally tried my hardest to do the weirdest, craziest things I could possibly imagine. But also I think some of that came from skate videos too. Because when I was making those in the beginning and working with that stuff, you're doing so much silly kind of acting and strange stuff. But I think in the beginning, you try to copy, you try to imitate or become something a little bit more close to what you love. And in turn, you inevitably just become yourself. If you do it long enough. If you do anything long enough, you become yourself in the middle of it. Which Gus Van Sant answered that exact question with his remake of Psycho. Because he remade Psycho frame by frame by frame, but yet it's still a completely different movie. And that was his whole experiment going into it.
So that could almost be like a Buddhist saying, if someone's on a hill and someone says, the more you try to become your idol, you become you.
Yeah. Honestly, because whenever let's just say with movies, right? Whenever any of us have fallen in love with a filmmaker, say you have your Stanley Kubrick kick, right? Or your David Fincher kick. In the middle of that, you're watching all their work, you fall in love with it, but at some point it dissipates a bit. And then you end up at Steven Soderbergh or Ingmar Bergman or other filmmakers. And then you're in that little realm, that little bubble. Now you've already taken stuff that you've loved from all these other people, Andrei Tarkovsky, in any of these little moments. And inevitably, I think you can't help but be yourself. And sometimes, which is maybe doesn't work, maybe it comes out and it's not necessary. I mean, like even when you become yourself, you still have to ask yourself, what genre are you most pulled towards? I've done a lot of different genres and I still can't even answer that question. The next film is going to be a horror film, and I've loved scary movies forever. When I was really tiny, like 4 years old, I watched The Shining and I had the same exact haircut and I was positive it was me in the movie, and that really messed with me. My dad would fall asleep on the couch and then I would watch these movies. Like, well, the next night after The Shining, I watched Apocalypse Now because he fell asleep on the couch, and HBO just popped up, you know, in the middle of midnight. They went from Twister to Apocalypse Now, which is kind of a perfect little double feature. But yeah, so I don't know. I think inevitably you'll contemplate what it is you want to do. And then when it comes out, it's going to be, I mean, with filmmaking, it's not just you though. It's everyone, right? Filmmaking is not really a singular vision keeps it on track. But if you've brought the right artists together, then you're going to have something more beautiful than you ever imagined. And if you don't, then you're not doing it right, in my opinion. Hopefully.
So then it's okay to try to copy because then eventually you'll find out who you are or what genre you are or
Yeah.
amalgamation of things?
I think in the very beginning, go try to copy everyone. You know why? Because you have no clue what lens they used. You have no clue what camera they used. And you're going to put your camera in a similar position and it's going to look completely different because you won't have a comprehension on the difference between a 24 millimeter or an 85 millimeter lens. And that's just inevitably going to make it feel different, even when you're trying to do something similar. Because that's something I noticed when I was doing all these films with the Canon XL2. There was a point where I learned all this zooming. And I learned moving the camera around and getting it to a particular position. But then my evolution from that camera into DSLR cameras taught me everything about lenses. When I was very young, or in the very beginning of making films, I went to the camera store, the camera rental house, and I took an action figure. And I placed it in a position, and they let me try out all these lenses. And I put a piece of paper in front of the action figure, and it would tell me if it was a 24 millimeter lens or an 85 or a 50. And I'll go home and look at this material and kind of try to understand the grammar, I suppose, of it.
I'm wondering what you mean by the statement that you had lived the life of a 50-year-old by the time you were in your 20s?
Yeah, I believe what I meant in that context is where I came from, there's a lot of rough individuals, and I really gravitated towards those rough individuals on my own accord as a young child. There were some little rough patches in the household, but whose household doesn't have those rough patches? But obviously it kind of leads you down that path. I started skateboarding. A very large majority of the people I was spending time with started purchasing and other things, and they were, where I'm from, there's just a lot of violence that was happening, and I was pulled into this world where especially the time period I grew up in, it's like you had to be a specific kind of tough guy to get through that world. And I was really born this artist, but really what that means for me is seeing the world from a particular vantage point. And it might sound like a positive thing, but where I came from, it made you a target. And so you ended up being somebody that people were after, and not even in a bullying context, but just the groups of people that I surrounded myself with were such negative characters. I had no idea where I was going. A large majority of people I grew up with, unfortunately, have passed. From being from Cincinnati, Ohio, there's a lot of things that have torn that place up. But when I discovered filmmaking, it led me into a place that I looked at all these crazy episodes that I went through, some of which I'm writing into my take on Romeo and Juliet right now. When I decided to start making movies, the things that felt negative to me, that hurt me emotionally, suddenly made sense. It was as if the universe put me in positions to experience so many negative episodes that I then was able to write. I then had something to say. I had something I experienced. I had a group of humans in the country that I have experienced similarities to, and I knew the audience of people I wanted to talk to. So, unfortunately, there was a lot of craziness in my childhood growing up, but fortunately, leaning into the the filmmaking route, I think I've only benefited from those experiences. But I'm not sure if that answered anything or even said any details, but.
Do you feel, looking back on it now, that there was any memories that you could take away? You don't have to tell me which ones by any means.
No, I mean, there's nothing I'd want to take away. I grew up in a group of friends where we got a lot of fistfights. Not between each other, just with a lot of people around. And I never wanted to fight, but I was always in this kind of position to have to do so. And I think that certain elements like that, and feeling the pain of not wanting to cause others harm, and then also they started robbing people. When I was 16, I came home to my house. Well, actually, you know what? I think I was like 14, matter of fact. I think I might have been about 14 years old. I came home and the side door of the house was broken in, and all of my stuff was gone. And it was a group of friends who pretended to be friends with me suddenly came and, did this while I was at school. So, I mean, that's just one small episode in a world of living, in a small town with nothing to do, perhaps. But luckily, again, it fuels so much with what your scope is, and the kind of people you understand and the kind of characters I interacted with. Werner Herzog always says, don't go to film school, go to life. Go out and just live your life, get arrested. And I like to say, that's what I did. I followed Werner Herzog. So blame him. No, I'm just kidding.
I want to ask more, but I don't want you to have to...
No, you can ask me more. I mean, whatever.
Coming from a town maybe where filmmaking or being an artist or a writer wasn't embraced, what were some of the things people said when you knew that date, the April 23rd, 2006, that this is what you wanted to do? What were some of the statements? If you were going to make a movie with dialogue, and you would just show their dialogue, what would the dialogue be on the screen?
Well, so when I was making films in Ohio, when I was bitten by the bug, I was then living in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm originally from Hamilton, but then a little ways south of Cincinnati. And when I was in Cincinnati, there'd be plenty of individuals who wanted to make movies I would spend time with because we were friends. And their take on it was no one can make a feature film in Cincinnati, Ohio, because they couldn't do it. They couldn't step out and get it done. So I feel like every time I made another movie, there's always people saying, well, there's no way to sell it. There's no way to get it out there. There's no way to make money off this. It can't be done. And I think that's happened. I think that's said all over the place. I think everybody says it to each other. Like, for instance, a friend of mine who's 43 wants to go in and start doing a music career. And he wants to do a music video for himself. And people are like, you're 43, no one's gonna. But really the truth is that if he just goes and does it, there's no telling what could happen. There's no telling what could come from it. So there's always that there's tons of people. You know what? I was dating a girl. I must have been 24, 25 at the time. And I had made a whole slew of shorts at this point. And we went to her father's house for dinner and I showed him a short film. He watched it and then he looked at me and said, "Don't quit your day job, kid." And got up and walked away. Now this guy was a country guy, really. And he just looked at me and, "Don't quit your day job." He did no emotion. I look at him during the short. There was nothing happening in his face. I thought, this isn't for him. And it was one of the David Lynch ones. It was one of the early, crazy, strange David Lynch ones. So I mean, it wasn't a normal thing that he would see on TV. But those are the moments that you just got to say, why are you living life anyways? You're living life for yourself. So do whatever makes you happy.
Do you think you know what you would be doing if you were back in Hamilton?
I'd be making movies.
You'd be making movies.
So in Cincinnati, where I was from, where I was making movies out there, and I was putting them in the Esquire Theater, the local art house movie theater right there. And I could have continued living that life, selling tickets, making enough money to eat on and live. And then I just decided to jump on a train and go out to my sister's in San Francisco and see what happens getting down to Hollywood. And you never know till you try, till you go out and see what could take place.
So you took the train, the Amtrak?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I bet that was cool.
3 days and sitting upright for all 3 days. But it was an adventure, and there was a bunch of us in there. Not people I knew, but a lot of travelers. So,
right.
Yeah.
Patrick, I think you've said whatever it is you want to do creatively, that you should do it no matter what, even if it's for free?
Yeah, oh yes, yeah. Well, in the very beginning, I was making films and not thinking about film festivals or I was making them really exploring the art. And now, 16 years later, looking back, I think it really caused me to build a fundamental understanding of the moving image and what it is to juxtapose it and how to tell a story with the camera. And I didn't have all this pressure on me. when in the very beginning. So like if you really love to do something, you can figure out how to get something made. You can find friends to pull together. And in today's day and age, there's so many ways to build stuff nowadays with the digital technology, with everything at our fingertips, that if you really want to do it, you can get the stuff out there. I mean, it's crazy to even say it right now because it's so long and it's almost like we've heard it so many times now. You know, you have people like Sean Baker who made Tangerine.
Yeah, but
Tangerine
that's
with
good.
the iPhone.
That's the second one.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, made Tangerine with his iPhone back then. The iPhones now are even better.
Right.
You know, so everybody's got these cameras, so that's really where that comes from, is just the concept of, I didn't think to myself, oh, I need to do a Kickstarter to raise money to make this thing. Just make something. And then if you do that, you're going to get people's attention. And eventually, I mean, I was never even thinking about getting film budgets. And then it just naturally built into getting them. But I think it's only because of the drive to never stop making. You know, as you can make a short film, you can make 50 short films in this house, and every single one would look different to a degree, depending on what the genre is, how you shoot it, what the story is. So I think that at the end of the day, if you want to do something, do it. And if you don't do it, then it's your fault.
Is there one film out there that's your film school? That when you watch it, it teaches you so much, whether you turn the sound down, whether you speed it up, where like it has so many things that it teaches you about filmmaking inadvertently. It's not actually about filmmaking.
Well, I do have a particular movie that caught my fancy and caused me to rewatch it numerous times. Let's see if you know what this is from. Do you know what this is from?
Okay, so A Clockwork Orange?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So Clockwork
Nice.
Orange.
Uh-huh.
I'll fix this before I mess up the audio.
That's nice. That's a nice tattoo. I like that.
I got that to remind myself of what you're mentioning, actually. Clockwork Orange is interesting to me for multiple reasons. And one of those reasons is Stanley Kubrick had made 2001: A Space Odyssey, went completely over budget, and wanted to show the studio he can make an independent film. So in Clockwork Orange, a lot of times he's running the camera, he's doing a lot of the editing, he is putting together a lot of the sound. And it was this moment where I suddenly realized that's how I was making films early on. So I watched Clockwork Orange constantly, and I was reading this book on Stanley Kubrick and how he puts his films together. And he talks about designing his films like chess moves. And if you look at Clockwork Orange and the way that he juxtaposes close-ups and wide shots, and the way he lit, almost everything's lit with these natural light bulbs. I mean, he got these high-powered light bulbs, but if you watch it, they're inside the shots all over the place. So he would try to light the scene 360 sometimes, not like the scene where they beat up the homeless man in the beginning. And that film is so, people come into Clockwork Orange and have such a misconception of what it's even about. Because really, I think it's about the fact that it's almost like a futuristic coming-of-age story. It's this weird Grimm's fairy tale coming-of-age story about this guy learning who he truly is and how you can't change who you are. But half the film, he's being horrible and corrupt, and then the other half of the film, everyone that he's been horrible to is getting their revenge on him. But a lot of times people can't make it past the halfway point of the movie. So I always meet these people I talk to about the movie that didn't fully see the whole picture. With all of that said, another facet is Kubrick was the only filmmaker, from my understanding, in the history books that was able to pull that movie out of an entire country because of death threats he was having and stuff of that sort. So to me, that movie, I think, I wanted to get the tattoo to remind myself of where I started making films and what was in my head in the beginning of putting images together in sound. And so Clockwork Orange, I think, would definitely be one for lots of young filmmakers to dive into, because there's so much there in the movements, and everything is purposeful, every single detail in all of his movies, as we know. But yeah.
Do you play chess?
I do. Yeah.
Because I think, didn't he play for extra money? Like
He did.
Play people
Early
in the park
on, he
or
was
something?
playing chess to pay his rent. But yeah.
And so do you find in some ways that a film set is like a chess game?
It is. My saying that I always say is I'm playing chess, not checkers. So everything I'm trying to decide what the next movie is, I'm thinking about the movie I'm going to do after that, and so on, and hoping that, because I mean, you can't, some filmmakers have gone from their indie film straight up to the $100 million budget, and then that movie failed, and then they lost their career. So I feel like there is kind of, you really, building up in what you're doing, but then also going back to on set, if there's an issue, not only should you be ahead of it in the concept of, as a director, dealing with it and putting the issue to rest, but at the same time, it's like how you deal with somebody's mentality is how they're going to react. For instance, I was making a feature film, my second one in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was one of my final projects before I came out west. And I went outside for a quick phone call. When I came back inside, everybody was shocked. And a gentleman had walked over and just hit the detach button on my tripod so the camera fell and broke the lens. I was so in shock at the time because everybody's reacting that I'm thinking in my head that I have to be joking. It's not really broken. And the next day we're going to film this scene in a tent and the wide angle lens had just gotten broken. Now my friend he said, I thought you were going to attack this guy. I saw it broken in his hands and I took a deep breath and I calmed myself and I asked him to step outside and we had a conversation. I told him, don't worry about it. He almost started crying. I said, it's okay, accidents happen. And little did I realize his mother was a little bit wealthier and was able to purchase us the exact same lens the very next day that I had bought that lens used. And then she came to set and brought us a brand new version of the lens.
Wow.
And if I would have reacted angry, he would have ran away, embarrassed. And so instead I tried to be kind and compassionate towards the situation. And so I think there's, the lesson there is always stay calm, no matter what's taking place.
Sure. You said something interesting about how you've seen an indie filmmaker make a low-budget film and then jump to a studio movie and it possibly could ruin that person's career. Do you think it's always about that the story or the product was bad, or that sometimes people don't want to see somebody make such an easy leap? Could happen with companies too. Like, ooh, this is getting too big. We can't have this. This person shouldn't have gotten that chance. I don't know.
Yeah,
wondering.
no. That's interesting. Well, one particular situation is an indie filmmaker went to make a big franchise film and another franchise film came out at the same time. And so one of them tanked at the box office. And so it was, and the movie's a good movie. And then I think that, I don't know how the studio system works in that respect. Like, I don't know how they view those numbers or have conversations amongst themselves. But I can imagine you have to put the blame on somebody for why the thing didn't do well. And then who do you point out as the novice director coming off of a $250,000 movie? So I believe when I was reading this, my first inclination was you should make 4 or 5 movies before you make that $100 million. Because Ron Howard's film, the Star Wars one he made, I don't think it grossed as much money as the other Star Wars pictures did, but he's Ron Howard. So, I think if you're comfortable in that setting, then it's harder to be the reason, perhaps. But, yeah, so I don't know. Just what I've seen of studio filmmaking, I feel like you really have to go into that with the concept of playing chess and not checkers. Because you really have to make those decisions on like how you're going to push your career, because your film's got to make money. If they're not making money, then you're not making movies.
Sure, but that that's great that you brought up Ron Howard, and he's Ron Howard. It's different. If you look, you were in San Francisco for a while, so these quote unquote, I hate to use this term, but tech disruptors. I know it's a cliche, but some may have had an idea or a company that was actually brilliant, but maybe it disrupted the status quo too much, and the powers that be didn't want that. So if the newbie comes and does something, whether it's good or not, yeah, you rose too fast. Yeah, this isn't going to work. But if you're an established name.
I think a lot's about to change, though, too, with the concept of just so many indie investors there's so much money there, and now there's so many streaming services. I think even AMC is more accessible to try to distribute your movie theatrically yourself. Hence all these distributors popping up out of nowhere, where there's tons and tons of film distribution companies. So I really think at the end of the day, where the studio system has planted themselves with doing these $100 million movies, and they've basically removed the $20, $30 million dramas and stuff that they were making forever. I feel like inevitably the indie cinema world is going to overtake most of what that is, or maybe that's going to compartmentalize a bit, or maybe it's always going to be there. I mean, really at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of money there to make all kinds of films. So, you know, whether or not it's the studio system or something indie, I think that maybe they'll exist. But I guess really what I'm getting at is it's a time where you can really do whatever you want and get things out there. I mean, there's so many indie films that end up in mass releases in theaters that are made with no one's permission. Maybe that's where it goes to. Feeling like you have to ask someone's permission or need to get the money to do this thing. Or
Right.
yeah. Number 1, I Want to Believe. Number 2, Fortress. Number 3, Mistrust. Number 4, 8 Slices. And number 5, Ladies Quilt Club Scandal.
Which of these movie titles do you think is fake?
Let's see. I would say if I did a search on IMDb, either 8 Slices or I Want to Believe, and I would have to say probably 8 Slices.
You think that's a fake?
Possibly. It feels like it.
Of these 5 titles, which movie title catches your eye where you might want to see that film?
Probably the Ladies Quilt Club Scandal.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like it could be in the genre of horror. It could be scary.
Okay.
Or maybe only scary to a 6-year-old. I'm not sure. Perhaps. It depends.
How would you rate these titles from best to worst?
Best to worst. So we'll say the best one being number 5 as far as, or like the first one, or the first one I say would be the best?
Sure.
Okay, all right, let's do that.
Okay. Your
let's-
favorite? Yeah.
The best one of all these, Mistrust, would be my top one. I like the way these 2 T's are. I feel like I could see a poster where that could really go into it. Maybe the T's are leaking into some background imagery. The second one would be Fortress, because one-word titles are always better than anything else, to a degree, in my opinion. And then the third one, I would say, would be Ladies Quilt Club Scandal, just because I want that to be my number 3rd. Not necessarily that I really think it's the number 3rd. But then I would probably say I Want to Believe 4, and then the 5th one would be 8 Slices.
Okay.
I don't like the way the 8 looks with the word slices next to it. It's just one of those things that...
Would it be better if it was the word 8, you think? Like 8
Maybe,
miles?
but 8 Slices feels like a C movie that the title was chosen because it's going to be above the A category on the list, you know, where it's going to be all these numbered movies. You're like, what are these 55 movies? I have no idea what they are. 8 Slices, that should be a sci-fi. And it should be about alien pizza. Aliens come here and we eat their pizza and then we become aliens. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a brand new... Maybe we should do that. Or it could be the sequel to Killer Clowns from Outer Space. No, I'm just kidding. Killer Clowns from Outer Space is an amazing movie, so... Okay, anyway.
Okay, we'll revisit 8 Slices in just one moment. What would you say are the genres for each of these movies?
Do I need to say the title and then the genre, or should I point to them and say them? Or
I think if you don't mind just saying it, yeah.
The title
just
and
in
the
case
genre?
someone tunes in late.
Okay, all right. Let's see. So 8 Slices should be sci-fi.
Okay.
Ladies Quilt Club Scandal is definitely horror. Mistrust is psychological thriller. Fortress is a good old-fashioned war film. I Want to Believe is a Trump documentary.
Okay. Okay, great. If you had to pick one of these 5 titles for your next film, which one would you pick?
Mistrust.
Mistrust? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that you really like that. That's good. It's like a good, strong title. I like it.
It's a strong title. You know, immediately I want to get Kathy Bates in it. And, you know, maybe we do a different take on Misery where she ends up being the one in the bed and someone else is, you know, I don't know, Mistrust. Or you get Crispin Glover back and have him in it, and it's almost like get him in it as Willard and have him in, I don't know, Mistrust. I don't know. There's something in there with either Crispin Glover and Kathy Bates should be in the movie, and they should be family. There it is.
I could see it also being a legal thriller too, kind of like The Firm. But yeah, anyway, okay, I'm not supposed to be giving answers. So here, sorry, I'm overstepping my bounds. So Mistrust is the one that you like the most. What would the plot be? You just kind of lightly gave us something, but
yeah, Mistrust is about a mother-son story where the son is trying to deal with his body dysmorphia, but the mother doesn't know he's suffering from body dysmorphia. So he's going through these bouts where he's not eating. Now they live on a farm and they're isolated. And the mother, she likes to play her little video games, but the son gets angry at her, and one day he ends up deactivating their electricity. And then the second half of the film, they're in the dark with candles, and she begins to get paranoid about him. And unfortunately for him, she's been dealing with her own delusions. And so it ends up, you know, obviously the third act is going to be pretty harrowing, and we'll see which one of these two people come out alive.
so not having electricity strips away any distractions.
Strips it away. It makes them to where they have to deal with each other, confront each other. And in the heat of the ending, where he tells her the truth, that the son that she adopted, he actually murdered, she actually tells him her own truth and that he's adopted himself. And I hate to spoil it, but...
Right. Wow.
Mistrust.
Wow, that's
Coming
good.
in just a few months.
Right. Okay. So maybe not. Do you think what network would show that film?
Oh, FX, or maybe the Sundance Channel. HBO Max would want it, but we wouldn't sell it to them.
Oh no.
No,
Okay.
we tell HBO, it's not the right fit.
Sure.
We want to be on FX.
Not Hallmark.
No, hell no, not Hallmark. No.
Okay, it might be a little too dark.
No.
For
FX
like
is
a
a good
Christmas-
channel. I like FX because FX is in the middle of the country in rural areas where a lot of people wouldn't see your cinema. Like I actually, in truth, an EP of mine was talking about where would you want, this next picture to end up. And I want my next movie to end up in all these rural areas. I want people that wouldn't have HBO, that wouldn't have these other streaming services, to just come in off of their hard job, sit down, flick on the television, and there on FX could be your movie. I'm not sponsored by FX. I just want to make that clear. I just watched a lot of it growing up.
Sure. That's awesome. Okay. So of all the movie titles, of which ones are true, which ones weren't, and what they're about, I'll reveal the sort of synopsis here. So number 1, I Want to Believe, is a documentary by Jay Horton, who's a filmmaker we've interviewed.
So I was right about the documentary.
You were
portion
right.
of it.
You were right. However,
But it's not about Trump, though.
Well, not quite. It's a thrilling study of the UFO phenomenon and the people who decided their lives, the people who dedicate their lives to present credible information for skeptics and believers alike.
Wow.
So I Want to Believe.
I love UFOs.
Okay, great.
I'm going to check out this documentary.
Okay, wonderful. Jay Horton. And then Fortress is an action film, and it's also by a filmmaker we've interviewed, James Cullen Bressack. And it is a group of criminals led by Robert's former nemesis, which is Balzati, who is hellbent on revenge and forces a retired CIA agent and his estranged son into a high-tech bunker. Will the thick walls and defenses be powerful enough against this enemy's forces? So it's a revenge action film. Number 3.
Pretty much in the war space, too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of military government aspect to it, right? Number 3 is Mistrust. That is a romantic drama by Shane Stanley, who we've interviewed here. And this is having no commitments and never having been vulnerable. Veronica enjoys being a mistress.
Oh, wow.
And she comes to realize her best friend holds the key to her heart and is the only one capable of extracting her emotions. Sounds good to me. Number 4, 8 Slices. It is a real film. It's a drama by Nick Westfall, and it's produced by Ramphis Myrtle, who we've had on. And I've actually watched this film. Some of the other films I actually haven't watched. 8 Slices is actually excellent. It's about a new hire who joins a small town pizza restaurant just as the business fails and its employees question the American dream. And it has a lot to do with influencer culture. I don't want to give away too much about it, but it's actually, I really enjoyed it. So 8 Slices.
So it's not a sci-fi?
It's not a sci-fi, no.
Okay, well.
It's really well done. And then number 5, Ladies Quilt Club Scandal. That I made up.
Okay.
So, but thank you for choosing it. And just thought that would be, sort of throw people off a little bit, because as a quilt club, you think of, nice ladies, talking about their grandchildren maybe, and you would never expect a scandal to break out, but it does.
Well, I felt like it could be a good murder mystery.
Oh, I was thinking more sort of hidden money in the walls, Ponzi scheme, something like that, where these ladies were being used and they didn't realize what they had gotten themselves into. Nice ladies.
Or a group of older women got together with no health ailments, and they decided they were going to lie to the government about a bunch of health issues to get a ton of money.
That could be.
And they just seem totally, and they start buying Porsches and buying this crazy flashy stuff, and we can make a reality show out of it.
Yeah, I guess so. But these were actually these were good ladies. These and somehow they got suckered in by the wrong person. So, but anyway, I don't really have it fully fleshed out. It was just. But thank you for choosing it.
Yeah.
When you begin writing a screenplay, I understand you start with a number.
Oh yeah. Well, generally, say you've already have the idea, and that at this point for me, I believe in the incubation period. Some call procrastination, which procrastination does exist, but I do believe your mind, your psyche, if you're focusing on one specific tale, there's a period of time that you're writing a lot of notes down. And then eventually I'll do a paradigm, which for me is writing a line across the top of a piece of paper. And then I always choose a random number. And the number for clowning was 34. And I put 34 notches at the top of the piece of paper. And for me, this paradigm is the only blank sheet of paper I'll ever face. And I'll force myself to put a scene, one sentence describing that scene, telling myself the whole story on that piece of paper. And then from there, once that paper's filled, I'll translate it over to note cards. And as I'm translating every one of those, 34 will become 38 to 40 note cards on the wall. And then obviously when you write it, it'll become 90 to 100 scenes eventually, once you're really breaking it down. But for me, by the time I get to writing pages, I'll have already told myself the story in its entirety 3 different times. And so it really frees me up to, at that point, just have fun with it. And also improvise. I like the idea of writing and knowing so much about where I'm going that I can just forget all of it and just be there. And sometimes the story will take some lefts or rights, but I know where I want to try to get to in it. And for me personally, this all developed out of the need to finish the screenplay. And so for me, it's as long as I have the paradigm filled out and the note cards on the wall, then I know that the script will be written.
Is that a fear of yours? I know you're very much about finishing it, but does that plague you?
The only time I'm ever feeling a kind of fearful notion is when I'm doing the paradigm, because I think there's still the question mark of, will this idea fulfill itself? Will it fully come to fruition? And so it probably saves months and months of heartache where you have an idea, and if you just sit down and start writing and maybe you get 20 pages into it and then you get sidetracked and you don't know where you're going, well, you could end up coming back to that screenplay for months. For me, maybe 3 days to a week, if I haven't fleshed out that paradigm fully, I'll generally put it into a very specific drawer with other ideas where they'll percolate longer. And so for me, it's once the note cards are on the wall, I know that's the next script that I'll write. And then it also helped me, like this process has now breached me into being a professional writer. And what that means to me isn't necessarily making tons of money or being able to sell scripts quite at this particular moment, but being able to execute a screenplay in a timely manner. And I think you really have to compartmentalize your process to be able to fulfill that need. So if a studio was like, you have 30 days, some writers really maybe couldn't sit down and say they could do it in 30 days, where that process kind of lets me know, like, okay, it's here and I can push this faster.
So let me see if I understand that correctly. So 34 is almost like plot points?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I'll also decide early on if it's going to be 3 acts or 2 acts or 4 acts. And that's based on the character, the genre, what's happening in it. But the number is just a random, I'll even do stuff as far as Googling that number and reading behind it. It's never an odd number. I'm an even number guy, so I never do odd numbers. Every script ends in an even page, and it ends in an even number of scenes. Or I delete a scene.
Are there numbers that you just think are bad luck?
No.
Okay.
No. I think that numbers are telling us a lot. And I think if you're open to it, you can, they're guiding us in particular ways. Now this is going into another notion of life, but screenwriting is all about numbers, right? And getting into a scene as late as possible, out as early as possible. What's the point of the scene? How many pages is that scene? I don't know. I feel like a lot of numbers, it all is broken down so much as numbers, right? Like even when you look at how many lines can fit on one specific page. So you're always kind of locked into that realm. Early on, I heard David Lynch say that he would use note cards, and if he got the 56 note cards, then he would know that he had enough to write a screenplay. And so then reading lots of screenwriting books over the early decade of doing it, I ended up grabbing little tiny snippets from different people's processes. And so, that's what I ended up doing. Which is interesting, though, because I handwrite everything. So at some point, I end up having a lump of note cards in my pocket because I'm too afraid to leave them at home because there's just too much information there.
Oh, so you take them with you?
Depends on the story. Depends on the story. Like, so the one that's on my wall right now, I'm much more confident in what it is. It fell out so fast, so simple. But if it's a very complex thing, I might get more nervous and, I'm kind of a nervous person though. I go back to the oven multiple times and check to make sure the thing's off a billion times. I'll be out the door, be like, one more second, I'll run back inside, check everything again. Unplug every charger.
Or do you have any note cards on you right now? Sir, do you have note cards on you?
No, I don't have note cards on me,
Okay.
but my next one's on the wall, so I always take pictures of it. Wow, so I can zoom in case something happens too.
And so is that because you're afraid of that you won't remember it or something will happen to it?
I'm afraid the building's gonna burn down and it's over, and I'm just gonna have to figure it all out over again.
Okay, that's fair. But then you don't put it on an app or in the cloud?
Never.
Okay.
No.
It's not
Only because I like to physically write. I do a lot of typing and then editing when I don't want to necessarily edit the future films, but all my past work I've edited and did all the sound design and mixing and all this different things generally for most of them. So I like to be as physical and not looking at a screen as often as possible. So I hand wrote a 156-page draft a long time ago when I was first learning how to write screenplays. I had this notion of like, what if I hand wrote an entire script? And so I had all these note cards up and I would choose a random scene and write it. And then at the end, when I had it all written, I would put it all back in order. And then I'd type the whole thing. I would never do that again. But I do think every story is asking for a different process. Like there's a script I've been writing that doesn't want any pre-production and it just is there and exploring and writing that. But generally, I like the prepping part of it.
Does it have anything to do with numerology?
I've read a lot about numerology. I wouldn't say that this necessarily has to do with that as much as maybe a little OCD. But also there's a part where I feel like, so I've written maybe 20, 30 plus screenplays, and I feel like every time I sit down to write, there's always a notion of, will I get through this one? You know, like, I don't know, there's always this kind of notion of like sitting down and saying, you know, am I going to make it to the end of this thing? And so I love the pre-writing because it kind of already answers that question for me, especially if it's really alive. And like I'm telling myself the story and I'm so entertained, I lose a couple hours while just telling myself it. But.
Did you see Pi?
Oh yeah, wait. Darren Aronofsky's Pi? Yeah. Definitely.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just thinking of just some brief scenes. Just I know it's not the same, but.
Well, I love his extreme close-ups where he's like on his eyeball and waking up into like a little nosebleed, and no, that movie is amazing. Yeah, Darren Aronofsky's the best.
He sure is.
Yeah.
Why do you give your characters their birth date?
Well, early on, when a character births out its name, because at some point the name comes to me, but it feels like they've declared it to some degree. Like that's the notion I'm trying to feel in my gut when something is said. I'll choose a random birth date out of the sky. I'll look up all the facts, all the zodiac, all the horoscope stuff I can find about this particular day. And my belief is the reason we read horoscopes and zodiac and say that it's similar to ourselves is because I think we are that zodiac sign in the womb, and then elements of your childhood alters parts of that zodiac sign, which gives you billions of different personalities because we all live different backgrounds and little tiny things start to shift even though we have all these similarities. So I'll look up a character's birth chart and I'll begin to decide, yeah, but this character was abused or this character went through this, and so that would alter this and that would alter that. And at some point, the character will just start to come to life and I'll forget about it. And they'll just kind of find their footing, hopefully, and you'll be able to follow that path.
So in clowning, what were the two leads' birthdays?
Well, you know, clowning is an interesting tale because here's how clowning came about. It's a little different. My best friend, producing partner, Jonathan Gallardo, he told me that his girlfriend was pregnant. Paige is her name. And they're pregnant with their first baby. So immediately, I know I want to make my friend a little film. I'm thinking maybe like a little documentary, taking a documentary subject, putting it into a narrative structure, maybe filming them while she's pregnant, you know. So I have that in my head. I'm thinking about that as a movie. I go to bed and I have a dream. And in the dream, you know when you come to in the middle of a dream and you already know what's been happening? I come to in the middle of this dream and I'm driving through the desert. And I know in my head that there's something in the back of the van that I had nothing to do with, but everyone's after me because of this thing. So I start to feel that tension and that stress, and as it begins to bubble, I suddenly hear a giggle to my right. And I look over and I see this female clown, and it makes me wince in fear. And when I do this, I suddenly see that I'm wearing a clown outfit. And I look in the mirror and I see paint. And I woke up from a dream and said that mixed with my friend's real life is a neo-noir crime film I've never seen. And in his real life, he was making lip balm called Mama Earth. And I always have a stick of lip balm called Mama Earth because he's got his own company. And I put it in the movie, so he had to give me lip balm for life for free. So it's not product placement. You don't need to buy Mama Earth.
But that's his job, right? And then he gets into...
Yeah, then he becomes a clown for hire, and before you know it, he's wanted for murder and trying to prove his innocence.
So, you had never had a job as a, some in LA, there's all these, princess parties and these different things where you dress as different...
No, but my grandma Lil, she loved clowns. Her whole house was covered in clown paintings and clown sculptures, and I always wanted to do a movie with clowns that wasn't about clowns. And I like the idea that clowns are so embedded in the horror genre today. And I wanted this movie to be a crime romance film and just know that when they watch it, they're going to be thinking this feeling. There's all this horror feeling in the picture, but it's just because of where clowns are today in our society. But the film itself is not a scary movie.
Sure. And some of the
Yeah.
crime stories that have happened with individuals who dressed as clowns, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
And so do these two characters, let's say the male clown and the female clown, do they have birthdays, and what birthdays are those?
Well, so the male clown, in Milo is his name in clowning, that's closer to my friend. So that was more based on Jonathan Gaedo and his reality. So there wasn't necessarily a birthday for that particular character. Now, Pele, I didn't pick a specific date. I just knew she was an Aries. I knew that she was going to have this dominance about who she is. And I knew that she would be an Aries sun with a rising Taurus. And so then I started to read about those two zodiac signs early on, and I began to learn more about who she is, and then she woke up pretty fast. So there wasn't a particular birth date for that one. That was more of a broad stroke. But that's because that character has a lot more going on than what you realize in the beginning. So she was built differently. But most characters, that's a way I'll give an actor some direction early on, as I'll give them a particular birth date and their horoscope and start feeding them stuff every week just to get their minds, like I'll be like, here's your horoscope today and here's how your character feels about that based on his or her life. And so it'd be kind of some ways that we start talking about it, and eventually they take that over too. And eventually I stop doing that and the actor will just start doing it.
So sounds like it's Pele's way or the highway, and she's never wrong.
That should be the tagline. That should be the tagline.
How does this deep understanding of the character help you develop the story?
The character is the story. So unless your film is plot driven and say it's Friday the 13th, and perhaps in that picture, the characters being regular teenage, early 20s people, then maybe their characters aren't necessarily driving that tale. But in general, the more you understand about your character, the more you comprehend it, the more they begin to take over the story. They begin to make choices. And if they're making choices, then that's playable actions that actors can embody. And a lot of times there's, a lot of films that are put together where actors don't have playable direction coming out of the screenplay because plot's happening to them, when really the character plot should be happening because of them. So I think at the end of the day, if there's a moment you're writing something and you don't have a deep understanding of the character, then you're probably writing too prematurely. You probably need to take a second and start writing in that character's diary. Because why tell the story about, let's say, Scarface with Al Pacino? Imagine if that character wasn't as developed as who he became. Well, the movie Scarface is Scarface because the character that he plays is that psychopath that builds up into having this huge momentum, this monumental moment at the end. But that's all coming from character. So if you're sitting down to write that story and you don't know who that character is, or you're not fully alive with that individual, then they can't make choices. And then in my opinion, then maybe the story could die or fall flat, be boring.
Do you think horror dictates you said that the story is dictated by the character, but is that always true with horror films?
Well, in the horror realm, you have a lot of different types of genres, subgenres in that realm. Like for instance, The Shining. That is a story very driven on character choice and character needs that lead them into that realm, right? But if you look at Nightmare on Elm Street versus Friday the 13th, let's say, as two comparisons of similar genres even, Nightmare on Elm Street, you actually have kids that have more developed, their characteristics are more developed in Nightmare on Elm Street, to where they actually have goals and they have things that they're trying to conquer in their personal lives with their with their relationships amongst each other. Where Friday the 13th, they're mainly just hooking up and then getting slaughtered. With all of that said, what I'm hoping to bring into the horror genre is a thematic idea. For instance, in my film Bickle that we're going to go into making, the theme of the movie is how far would you go for your family? And what I love about that is the theme in horror films doesn't generally translate into the realm of like from the characters, like the characters who are innocent and getting injured throughout the piece. They might have a thematic idea attached to them, but it doesn't usually go to the killers. Usually the killers are these mindless people just attacking. In this film Bickle, what I'm excited about is the thematic idea of how far would you go for your family even translates over into their world, where the two killers in the film, they are family and they're trying to protect each other. So hopefully we go into this Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of genre and kind of turn it on its head a little bit.
Sure, and Carrie, that was somewhat similar in that she necessarily wasn't the bad guy in the beginning, but in the end she becomes that as a result of what happened.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's driven by her story, but
Well, did Carrie ever become the bad guy though?
I don't think she was, but
Yeah, I mean, no, Carrie, that particular picture is really about, wouldn't you say that Carrie is more about a young woman becoming, or a girl becoming a woman and maturing into adulthood and wondering the differences about her body and trying to figure out grounding herself in her reality and trying to find her place amongst her peers. And then really it went into the horror genre because this is the worst it could be. You know, this is like the way that they treat it, like that opening sequence in the shower is the worst thing that can happen to you in that smaller microscope,
Sure.
you know, of being a teenager. Like,
Oh, yeah.
that is the worst thing that can happen to you. Being stuck in that shower, having your period, and everybody being like, oh my gosh, look at her.
right.
You know, so it's an interesting movie. I think it's there's so much there. Brian De Palma was a master. It's interesting to bring up Carrie and Scarface all in the same.
Yeah. And then he did Blowout.
Oh, John Travolta.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a filmmaker, sort of. He's
Yeah.
a filmmaker in the film, and
Oh no, I mean sound designer. I love the way, like the sequences. First off, the way that Brian De Palma always used the split diopter, and he would have different parts of the frame in focus and like do these split screens, like in his movie Sisters. This amazing split screen sequence where someone's being murdered and the other person ends up seeing them, and I don't know. He's such a master at the split screen and really using the frame in those kind of ways, and also moving the camera, I suppose, too, because he moved the camera a whole lot of crane shots and very complicated stuff.
right.
There's a great documentary on Brian De Palma. Everybody should go see it.
Oh, what's it called?
I think it's called De Palma, I believe.
Okay.
I think it's on Netflix.
Oh,
or
great!
something
Yeah, I'll
like
have to
that,
check it out. Yeah, I saw the making of Carrie, and I'm trying to think of what there was another one behind the scenes I saw, but yeah, I'll have to check that one out. That's good.
Like, you know, like The Exorcist. The Exorcist is a great film because it's about a little girl dealing with the fact that her parents are divorced. And it's really about a little girl coming to terms with the fact that she doesn't have her father figure anymore. And I think that's what tugs at our heart so deeply. And then she becomes possessed. And then we're not in a scary movie, we're in a drama. And I think that that's where the departure is between certain scary movies and other ones that are more a little, but they're all great though in their own ways.
We want you to think of a movie character from the last 40 years.
Okay.
Be any character, male, female.
Yeah. All right, Travis Bickle.
What made you think of that character?
I thought, what is my top 10 favorite characters of all time? Boom, got it. What's my second one? That one. I just go with the second one. I'm an even number kind of guy. So.
Okay, right. Going back to the numbers. Okay. And what do you love about this character?
His search for who he is. Yeah, and just how pure his search. I mean, I know the movie's a little twisted, but there's something pure about the way he viewed people around him. You know, some kind of strange scope he was looking through at everyone.
Okay. How do you think that character was created?
In the writing process?
Mm-hmm. And also eventually too on set.
Gosh, you know, well, I know too much about the movie. So, I mean, in the writing process, the writer mentions that it was similar to what he viewed at the time and how confused he was by the wars going on and stuff of that sort. And so it was written out of a confusion. And then when they were making it, I know Robert De Niro drove a taxi in between doing Godfather Part 2. He actually drove a taxi for a number of weeks, I believe, to get ready for that character. And then it was based off of, I think it was Godfather Part 2 winning Oscars, that they went back to Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro and allowed them to make Taxi Driver. So, yeah.
How would you create the character? If you had a modern day Travis Bickle, maybe he's a rideshare driver. Maybe he works with the public and he's used to people of all personalities, maybe speaking down to him, maybe different trials and tribulations he deals with city life.
If I had to make him today, I'd have him work for a trash company. And he'd probably, because right now I think in this time period, we should probably be talking a little bit more about global warming. We should probably be talking a little bit about, so maybe that's a window into that world, where Travis can be trying to figure out who he is while being a trash worker. Trashman?
Okay, so he doesn't really have to deal with people maybe too much? He just has to deal with the fact that he sees all of this stuff being thrown away and wasted?
Yeah. Because, in Taxi Driver, he's got these great monologues about how dirty everything is. And, so I feel like you could still get there with him being in that world. And then he's still dealing with the other drivers, just like in Taxi Driver, where he's actually, and then we would call, instead of Taxi Driver, we'd call it, actually, no, never mind. I don't know what we'd call it. I didn't have good titles. I can't say it out loud.
Okay, well, we can come up with a title another time, but
yeah.
So it sounds like he realizes like the implication of his job and the fact that all of this is going to end up in a landfill, and then what it's really doing, and that so much of society isn't even paying attention to it.
Yeah.
And they just like maybe he sees, especially what if he drives or if he collects it in a really nice neighborhood, and people are just throwing stuff away that. Why would you, and people can't dumpster dive.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a private security company that monitors for those miscreants or whatever that are dumpster diving, so
he's like a modern day Robin Hood. He could be taking the trash from the wealthy neighborhoods and bringing it into the poor neighborhoods and letting them go through it.
Interesting. But there's a bitterness in him. If he was Robin Hood, maybe he'd have more hope. Because Travis Bickle didn't have much hope.
Well, he had hope though early on, I think. I think in that movie he starts with a certain amount of hope and maybe just a hope to be able to live every day, and then it so slowly gets peeled away from his relationships, I think, until the end, and then he becomes the hero. But
who's his love interest?
In
the
modern
version?
The modern day version? Mm-hmm. Probably another garbage man.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, just
sure.
If we're going to talk about global warming and we're going to, maybe, I don't know. For some reason, scenes from Brokeback Mountain popped in my head, and like kind of like a male kind of testosterone that they had with each other, and this kind of, and I started thinking about, I don't know who his love interest would be.
Like a bromance turned romance.
Yeah, perhaps.
Okay.
Maybe something in there. Because Taxi Driver, he was friends with these other drivers. And he got wrapped up with that young girl, but that was never a romance because he was trying to save her.
Right. Jodie Foster, yeah.
So, I don't know if there needs to be a romance, actually. Maybe there needs to be someone from a darker part of life that he decides to save.
So maybe someone that he sees going through the trash.
Yeah.
And he
in
saves
a poorer
things
neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay.
He starts bringing her more stuff, and I don't know.
Right.
Before you know it, he's got to save her, and next thing you know, we're at the exact same ending as Taxi Driver.
Right.
But we got there different.
Sure.
So it's a different movie then.
Would there be a letter?
A letter at the end? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this one would be from the president to him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
This would be a legit letter from the president asking him to come join the CIA.
We have some movie tarot cards here, and so it's 78 characters based on the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And We're wondering, what's the likelihood that there will be one character or movie that you've never heard of in this deck of cards?
I think probably there's an 86% chance that I will know what's in the deck.
86. Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, those are good odds.
It was good odds.
Yeah, I would go to Vegas with those odds. So, okay. Okay, sounds good. Well, why don't we, I think you shuffled them off camera.
did.
So we're good. So we've shuffled them. And why don't we, you could choose them or fan them out however you like. And we'll choose 3 from this. They're beautiful cards, by the way. Movie Tarot. And
we'll just choose one from any part of the deck?
yeah, we'll choose 3 total.
All right, I'll choose this one right here. This one's got my attention.
Okay. And that one is? Oh, okay, great. Do you know which character this is and who this is?
I did say I would know 86% of all of these cards, and I'm sure that statistic is correct. This right here, I cannot recall. It's
the Queen of Wands.
Yes, the Queen of Wands.
Right.
And gosh, she looks so familiar, especially with her hair to her side. It's not Jennifer Lawrence, right? It's not.
Just so you know, the archetype
Yeah.
for this character would be women, especially older women. Mothers, nurturing, devoted, supportive, focused, truthful, both reflective and active, concerned with foundations, security, and dependency. So that's Queen of Wands.
This isn't Jennifer Lawrence, though, is it?
I think it is.
Is it Jennifer Lawrence?
Yeah.
Well, then it's her from Hunger Games.
There you go.
It's Katniss.
It's okay. It's
yeah.
Jennifer Lawrence from the Hunger Games, but I'll tell you, this face does not look like Jennifer Lawrence totally. I just was looking at it and it's like, okay, it's probably Jennifer Lawrence from Hunger Games. Okay.
Okay, so we have.
So it does fall into the 86%.
It's
For the record.
yeah, you got that right. Okay, great. So we have that one character.
Yep.
Wonderful, and we'll maybe we'll pull another.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right.
I'm just making sure I can read the right character. That's all.
Oh, it gets easier and easier. The Chariot. And this is Russell Crowe.
Yes.
Gladiator.
Correct. Okay.
Yep.
Great.
I do not remember his character's name in Gladiator, though, so 86%. His horses look sad. Maybe he's heavy. See that? They can't quite, they're like looking quite, they're like, I don't know, this guy shouldn't be on us.
So that would be Russell Crowe as Maximus in The Gladiator. And his character type is competition, high stakes, ambition, discipline, conquest, victory, greatness, reason triumphs, the work of the will, right action prevails, overwhelming odds, sudden defeat.
Oh.
So that's his character type.
There you go.
Okay, and then the third.
All right, let's see. Oh, strength.
Okay, great. And that is...
If you don't know who she is, then you don't watch cinema. That's just the way it is. But it's from Alien. She really looks like she's from... I wouldn't say that's the first Alien. That's probably... Looks like the third Alien movie, to be honest, the way her hair looks. Her character name. I know Newt is a little girl from a later one. I think that was the David Fincher one, I think. Newt is in that one. But yeah, so strength. So yeah, what is her?
Sure, that would be Ellen Ripley.
Ellen Ripley.
And again, yeah, fortitude, resilience, strength of mind, courage, resolve, confidence, integrity, moral victory, spiritual rectitude, endurance, energy, action, vitality, power, force, violence, abuse of power, disgrace, and impotence. And her life lesson is perseverance is the answer. Seek out a better strategy, even if it's counterintuitive. So, great. So we have 3 very strong characters.
It's true.
Very interesting. Very interesting that we pulled those.
It's true.
Any one of those that you relate to more than the other? Doesn't matter gender so much, but in terms of
The truth is I'm amalgamation of all three of these put together.
Okay.
I feel like Maximus in the morning, Ripley in the evening, and Candace. That look on her face is me in the afternoon when I'm in the middle of writing and nothing's coming out.
Okay.
So yeah, I could see that.
If we were going to take all these three characters and put them in a film together, and they don't necessarily have to be who they are now, but their character types are the same, what would the story be?
I would want to take all three of these characters and I'd want to put them in a movie where they could travel in a phone booth into the past. Not like Bill and Ted. Okay, not like Bill and Ted. This wouldn't be funny at all. This would be a drama. It'd be a tearjerker. But we're going to take comedy elements from Bill and Ted. We're going to have these three. It's going to be like Guardians of the Galaxy. They're going to get a couple other people. Abraham Lincoln they're going to pick up. They're probably going to pick up Tesla.
The car or the founder?
The car.
Okay.
No, not the founder. No,
Okay.
no. They're going to pick up the car because that's what they're going to travel in.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, because they're going to go forward. They're going to get...
So they're going to go into the future
Yeah,
in a Tesla,
in a Tesla.
SUV, or the sedan model.
But here's some truth though. Talking about these as three different characters, there's a lot of similarities here. There's three different people that are trying to figure out how to become their best selves. And if they find out how to become their best selves, they might save the ones they love. And that's something that's in all three of these movies, even with Alien. And maybe in there lies the truth about what you need your character to search for. It has to be to better another person's situation, which isn't that what life is mainly about, is the idea of helping others and how far can you help others without anything in return?
Very true. And it's interesting too that you pulled these three, and they're very much about courage and strength and, conviction of ideas.
It's true. It's true.
And trying to do right.
I would love to see them all in the same movie together, though. I mean, they're all pretty amazing humans who fight with their hearts.
Right.
Except for maybe Alien. She's really in a different kind of position than the other two.
Why is that?
Well, she's like stuck in a horror film. Things are trying to kill him and she has to... But there's still a lot of character development going on here with who she is. So, I don't know.
Great. I love it. That sounds good. So they're traveling through time in a Tesla together. And who's driving, by the way?
Definitely the young lady from Hunger Games.
Okay.
For sure. She won't let anybody else drive. She's got her own issues, though, and at some point in the journey, they're going to get fixed, and eventually she'll let probably the woman from Alien drive. But see, Maximus doesn't want to drive. Just like these horses pulling him, he always wants to sit in the back.
Okay, so he sits in the back. Maybe he's a backseat driver.
Yep.
A lot of sarcasm. And Katniss is the driver. And then Ellen Ripley is the passenger.
Yeah, he's definitely a cynic. His family was already killed, so there's no one for him to save. So he feels, strange about even being in the position he is. And the young woman from Hunger Games, she definitely is in a different kind of position because she has the rest of her life ahead of her, where the other two are a little older.
Right.
They're a little older.
How did you go from making no-budget movies to raising $165,000-ish for Clowning?
Yeah, so Clowning came about in a very interesting way. The horror film we're going to be going into here soon, that picture we were in the process of building out, talking to different producers, executive producers for the horror film, and casting directors. And as we started to build that project, I became more detached from it because the current producers that were there at that moment, they were going around and talking to investors, but they weren't bringing me to those meetings. So out of a desperation to continue creating, I wrote Clowning. And then in the midst of that horror film, I needed to find an entertainment attorney because these contracts were going to start coming from these investors for the horror film. And I needed to be prepared because who knows what those were going to say. And obviously you just have to have an entertainment attorney. So at that time, living in West Hollywood, I realized calling entertainment attorneys around LA was going to be much more expensive. Most people want you to put down 20 grand or a larger retainer on them to come into a feature film. And so we didn't have that kind of capital laying around to get an entertainment attorney that way. So I called my uncle who works in international tax consulting and just asked him about getting an entertainment attorney. So he told me he would call. He's in Atlanta. So he contacted a bunch of different attorneys and he gave me the name of an individual named Kelly Fry. And I called Kelly and we had a conversation, and Kelly informed me that not only was he an entertainment attorney, but he was also an executive producer. But his executive producing hat was tapped. So he'll read the script. At that point, I had just finished writing Clowning, and he asked me what I was writing. I told him about Clowning. He said he'd love to read it. So I sent him Clowning, and he told me also he was $20,000 as an entertainment attorney, but he was willing to take $5,000 up front and get the rest out of the budget. So there was a part of it I was like, okay, well, this is the best deal we've gotten so far. So I sent him Clowning to give it a read, and that was on a Friday. And on Sunday, I get an email from him. Now, you wouldn't expect an entertainment attorney to be emailing you on the weekend. So I get this email, and he said it was one of the best scripts he's ever read. He waived his $20,000 entertainment fee, and also said that he wanted to be the executive producer of it and wanted to take a stab at finding the financing. From that point, we end up getting into a couple of different meetings with other financiers. At one point, we had financiers who came to the table with $250,000, but they wanted me to replace my lead, Jonathan Gaeta, who's my producing partner. So I didn't want to replace Jonathan because Clowning's based on his life, our love of our friendship, and also we love working together. And it was his film, his story, really truly to make with him. So I told him no, I wasn't gonna, for no matter how much money, I'm not gonna replace John. So he started to try to walk away from the table, and I kept him on the phone. And I said, listen, I can make this movie for any amount of money. You find me $50,000 and I'll make this movie happen. So he's like, all right, let me talk to a couple other financiers. And then within a month, he was able to pull together $165,000. And we were off to the races with Jonathan starring. Part of the actual deal we struck up was me cutting 20 pages out of the script. He was like, you either cut 20 pages out of the script or replace Jonathan. And so I was like, I'll cut the pages, which really, thank goodness, because we needed to cut even more pages than that, as you find out when you get into your editing process and cutting the movie from 115 minutes down to 92 minutes.
Was it were they consecutive 20 pages, or there were different parts where they didn't?
Oh, different parts. Just different parts that I chose to remove. And this my journey into this is very interesting because I've had a ton of freedom. So we got these investors that brought the money. They invest in movies often, and all very wealthy individuals. And when they invested it, I was already signed on to be a producer, writer, director, editor, sound designer, and then eventually I mixed the film too, but under a pseudonym. But what that gave me, for better or worse, is having so much freedom on the process. The crazy thing here was we had a 120-page screenplay. The money wasn't quite enough to do the film, so we ended up having to shoot that material in 17 days. So we shot 120 pages over 17 days. It was supposed to be 18, but one of the days got burnt out by the fire because there were fires that October. And so we had to cancel one of our days of shooting. So Clowning was such a treacherous undertaking because it's not a one location film. It's got around 30 to 40 locations throughout the whole picture. There's 60 or so actors in the piece. It's jumping from different time periods. And so it was very complicated with a lot of makeup changes to do this thing in 17 days. But I feel like coming through Clowning and using that resources, using the budget to make that picture, it really helped me figure out the final steps of making a movie with a big team. Because one of the questions they asked me on set was, where do you like to have your monitor? And at that time, I didn't have a direct answer because I had made all these movies with a camera on my shoulder. So where would I want to have a monitor? Well, now I know I want to create a massive amount of separation. So I want to have a handheld monitor in the future, be next to the camera and the actors, and I want the producing monitor, the monitor for everybody else, to be in a completely different space, far away. And I want to try to create this realm where no one knows when we cut. I'm kind of segueing into what I want to do in the future, but going back to clowning and getting that budget, it was the first time I ever was given money for something I wrote. And as we know in the history of cinema, that's how it used to work constantly. As you'd write something so good, they'd give you some money and you'd go out and try to see what you can do with it. So I was so thankful that it came about that way. And it was a crazy, crazy journey because then we go into COVID and we're in post-production. And so luckily I'm editing and doing all the sound design myself with a little 4-track audio recorder out there getting all the different sounds. And so throughout most of COVID, I was finishing clowning myself and having these private screenings with me and some of the main collaborators. And then our executive producer, he just wasn't as much involved in the selling of the movie. So me and my producing partner had to figure out how to get the thing out there and built our own sales package and contacted Gravitas Ventures and was able to get the thing sold. So now coming off of clowning and paying the taxes every year, because one thing people don't realize is when you create that LLC, every year you got to pay taxes on it. And that could be $1,300 depending on how many K1s you have to have made for all your investors. So it's like every time you make an indie film that you want to make money on, it's an actual company that you're spending money on every year. So then then suddenly we're in the middle of a pandemic and the movie, I have to finish it myself so we can get it out there because now we owe these people. My sister's house, a really nice house in Columbus, Ohio, is $150,000. So we spent more than my sister's house on this movie. And now we're in the middle of a pandemic where people are saying the movie industry is shifting and changing. But luckily the movie came out March 15th and it's on Blu-ray and Best Buy and Walmart and a bunch of different places. So it's really exciting to see that go out there. And so much came from that. And for me, clowning demystified the whole getting money from investors and selling movies. It's very much now just such a business and makes sense in how it works.
So from just your uncle contacting or getting you some numbers of entertainment attorneys.
Yeah.
And this individual wasn't even here in LA.
No, Tennessee.
Wow.
And then some of the
great
investors
story.
are in New York, other investors are in Florida.
And then the gentleman read the script over the weekend.
Yeah.
And said, not only I'm going to lower my retainer or whatever and take some of the money.
He waived his fees completely for just points.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and
that's great.
And then a friend of mine who became our casting director used his agent and his manager to start contacting name actors like Mike Starr and Bronson Pinchot and people like that. I met Bronson in a meeting, and he loved the script. Said that he hadn't read something that great since True Romance. I don't know if he really meant that fully, but regardless, I took it and it felt really great to hear that. But I love True Romance, and I don't think that necessarily. But anyways, I sat down with Bronson, and he's like, how do you not have an agent or a manager, but I'm meeting with you? How is this happening right now? And it's just such a unique moment where the truth is, I came down from San Francisco to Los Angeles. I found an independent rental house, and I went to this rental house. I was in the middle of a Hollywood production center. Are you familiar with those where you can rent little spaces for writing rooms and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So I went to a Hollywood production center and talked to this individual who owned his own rental house and convinced him to hire me. And then in the Hollywood production center, I went around to every single room and met everybody in the building I could. And then I called all the clients in this rental house. And I called each one and I would pretend like we're missing a lens and I would segue into conversations. And before I knew it, I was first AD on a little TV show that was for a couple of weeks from doing that. And then I met almost every person that worked on clowning with me came through the rental house. And then my friend who used his agent and manager to cast the thing with me, had his own selfie tapes business inside of the Hollywood Production Center, and we would use their lobby and we would use their rooms to do casting for free. So the clowning was built, and it looked like it had a budget early on, but for a couple months we were prepping the thing and had no clue where the money was going to come from. And I think that's a big testament to the whole scenario. And here's a really scary story. Early on, we knew the money was coming. We hadn't gotten the money yet, but we knew that we had confirmation it was coming. We had casted Bronson, Mike Starr, Dashiell Connery, Nana Ghana, and a couple of other actors, all SAG. And I suddenly get an email from the SAG office in LA, and they email me, and no one knows this actually. This is something only a couple of close people knows this, but now that it's out and it's over and it's all great, I can say it. But I got an email and they tried to shut down our production. They emailed me out of nowhere and said, "You're officially a non-SAG movie. It's come to our attention you've already filmed the movie and you're backtracking to try to become SAG so that you can sell this movie." We hadn't shot a single frame. What happened is I had posted on my Instagram. Now I worked at the rental company I mentioned. And there was a moment where the owner of the rental company came to me and said he just bought an Alexa Mini and some Cooke anamorphic lenses. And he said, go out for the weekend and do some test shoots with the equipment. So I filmed my friend dressed as a clown because I was writing clowning. This is before we even got the money. Oh, no, this is after we got the money because we had people locked. Or no, this is before we got the money because we were just filming when we actually did the test shoot. And so I post a still frame of him dressed as a clown, and then SAG won't take my call because I'm trying to explain to them that that's not from our movie and that they're just positive because they went through my Instagram. So I decided, I got on their website, I found every single SAG email I could find. And I wrote the most passionate email, just, talking about how I was a fourth generation, from a family that's a fourth generation paper mill working family, Hamilton, Ohio. It's against all odds that I would even be in Hollywood, let alone be giving six figures to make my first, movie with a budget. And I wrote this passionate email and I emailed it to like 70 people at the SAG building, including some of the people that run SAG. And then I got this email back said, for just this once, we'll make this SAG. And from now on, make sure that you never breach any of our rules again. Since then, I've done a couple of SAG movies and they've been really lovely, but that was terrifying.
Is even shooting a little like just practice, like teaser trailer or something, would that constitute going into production?
Yes. So
It does. Okay.
As soon as if you're in Los Angeles and you're trying to make a movie and you have any actor that's SAG at all, then you have to contact them and let them know what you're doing. If you want to do a read-through, if you want to have a meeting where an actor's already signed on to your project just to talk, all of those things they could flag and say that you have to be. So, but on the other side of the fence though, I get it because actors deserve to be paid for working. And so that's what they're trying to protect, which was crazy for our picture. I had so many SAG actors, they told me I paid all of our actors even better than any other production at our level because I wanted to make sure that people are being paid well, and almost our whole production most of our money went to actors. Another big thing that you don't know going into making an indie film at a $250,000 budget is that SAG's gonna take a deposit. So they took $14,000 as a deposit from us, which is not something you contemplate in your budget with $165 available. So we were almost $14,000 at the end of the budget. At the end of the shoot, at the end of the 17 days, we were like almost exactly $14,000 over budget, but we had to come up with that money ourselves because they won't return that budget until a month or two after you're finished shooting.
And so you have to deliver that via cashier's check, or how does that get
Oh, no,
delivered
that
to
was
them?
wired.
It's wired to
Yeah.
them, and you have how many days to get that to them? Like once they find out you're going into production, when is that paid?
Well, the deposit side of it, once you're totally sealed and you have your actors and then you send them your final paperwork that says what each actor is being paid, then they do a percentage of what the amount is you're going to owe actors, and then that percentage is what they ask you for the deposit. And then I think that has to be given to them a week or two before you go into filming, I believe. I can't quite recall the exact timing.
And then it's held thereabouts.
Until a month or two after you wrap.
Wow.
Yeah, which is where like I had to put a loan on my car and some other things to just make sure, because I mean some of our lead production heads needed their checks.
Well,
And
sure,
like for me, that's more important than anything, to make sure people are paid for their great work. Luckily, the loan on my car is already paid off and gone.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It was, but it was a really stressful moment coming off that movie and being like, whoa, we got to come up with $14,000 to get people situated. But also I've heard now that I've talked to a lot of people that have done $250,000 features, apparently it's very normal to go $30,000 to $40,000 over budget on a movie like that. So I don't think we really even hardly went over budget at all when it really comes down to it.
So you have those expenses plus you're paying on this LLC.
Yes.
And do you close out the LLC once the
No.
movie is distributed? It's forever something you're going to be
It's
paying
going to be a company.
for in perpetuity. So it's never
until it's I guess, and then you would dissolve it later if it stopped making money.
Okay.
But like right now we have a 10-year deal with Gravitas Ventures, so that movie will be out there for 10 years. And as that 10 years is going on, I got to keep the bank account alive, got to keep the LLC alive, all those things, so then the money can come through and everybody can get paid. But you can see how quickly, if you made multiple independent films and you're trying to create those vessels in which you can make money, that they could drain your bank account very fast. If you have a couple of those and you're making no money.
Sure, but you said if you were making no money, you could theoretically dissolve
Yeah.
the LLC, but
Yeah.
then that would cut off all chances of...
Ever making something from that project.
Right, so you have to decide, okay, is my film making no money? Do I cut my losses or do I hold out hope? Interesting, wow.
Yeah, and then I mean
to
at the
think
same
about.
time, I mean now you have investors. You have people who have really given you money, their personal money from their bank accounts. So, obviously I walk into this with a very honest mindset, and my main goal is to get them back their money. So, I mean, that's one reason why we had never sold a movie before going into clowning. So going into clowning, we really had to teach ourselves how to make a sales package, because a lot of people go to sales representatives to get their movie off into the world, but a sales representative is going to take a percentage on top of the distributor. And I've heard horror stories where you'll never see a penny. So for us, it was like, well, what are they doing that we can't do? And then we built this sales package and luckily got it out to Gravitas. But at the end of the day, it really also depends on who's the lead of your movie too. Because unfortunately, you do need to have some kind of name that people are familiar with to help them want to go see it. I mean, if you want to make movies and put them in AMCs, which I would like to do.
And so with Bronson Pinchot, did you watch Perfect Strangers growing up?
Oh yeah, most definitely. My favorite Bronson performance that really melted into my mind's eye, like April 23rd, 2006 was when I decided to start making films. Well, probably a few years later, I discovered the movie True Romance. And I watched that a billion times. So when I met Bronson the first time and he came in and talked about True Romance, my mind is like, whoa, I can't believe this is, right. 8-10 years later, suddenly we're talking about this. But Bronson's unbelievable. I wrote a particular psychological thriller for him to star in. And I'm hoping that we do that soon. He's gotten into an incredible health and just a great physical place. But he's the hands down best improvisationalist I've ever seen.
I mean, just from the show, I don't know how much of that was improv of his character, but hilarious.
Oh, he's so intelligent, so funny, and really is hungry to perform. Like if somebody's looking for a great actor out there, Bronson Pinchot is really just hungry to keep going.
Did he stop acting for a while?
For a little while there, he was renovating houses.
That's what
for
I think
fun.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, he got into he has a passion to renovate houses and to redo things like that himself with his own hands. He'll send me pictures sometimes of his own little rooms that he was doing during the pandemic.
Or somewhere in upstate New York. I think I saw some
and
place.
then he had a little reality show or something,
okay, maybe
right?
that's where I saw it, yeah.
And they were following him a little bit while he was choosing houses and choosing how to renovate them. But
oh, that's great.
Yeah, but he's doing a lot of acting now. He's definitely
Very
back.
cool.
Yeah.
How many distributors did you contact for your film Clowning?
I think my producing partner, once we built the package out, my producing partner, Jonathan Gaedo, he was contacting distribution companies. I believe we contacted maybe 5 or 10. We didn't contact a whole lot in the beginning. I had my heart set on Gravitas early on, and it's just, I don't know why. I looked at their arsenal of films, I looked at their logo and felt like aesthetically it just fit the picture a lot, which is not necessarily as far as the logo fitting the picture isn't necessarily the right way to choose a company. But a lot of companies have a lot of negative stuff written about them. So you look at all these small distributors and it's hard to find one that you can navigate well enough to know that you can trust them. Gravitas Ventures has been around for 16 years. I think they're they say that they're the most well-known indie distributor. I think that's true. But the person who started it is originally from Ohio. And now they've moved their offices back to Ohio. So that was another thing, me being from Cincinnati, Ohio, I was like, oh, it felt like home. It felt like I should, this would be the right company for this. They also put out Blu-rays. That was another big factor to me that some companies don't. They just try to do video on demand. So.
When Jonathan was contacting these distributors, is this just an email, a cold email?
Email, phone call. I think he would email every couple days and phone call every couple days. We don't just knock on doors, we try to kick them open. You're gonna have a conversation with us. If you don't like what we're doing, we wanna know why. And we wanna learn from it. So I know John, he's like me. We're gonna contact people and just, hopefully get their attention. But Gravitas got back to us pretty quick. So it was like, we probably contacted Gravitas and then within a month, they were securing the film. Now, part of that factor, though, they had to watch the film. So it was like during that month, we sent them everything and they got back to us, but yeah.
Were any distributors coming to you folks first?
There was 3 to 5 different distributors and international distribution companies that contacted us, but their track records weren't, it made us nervous. Because again, also a huge question I think all filmmakers are thinking is, what should I expect out of a distributor? And especially in the world of filmmaking, because making a movie like Clowning for me was building this giant mountain, but a lot of times the hardest mountains to build are the ones that we learn the most from and that move us forward in our timeline the furthest. So in terms of distributors, we were contacted by a few, but they weren't comfortable choices for us in the context that we couldn't find enough information that would show us that we could get our money back.
So you did your research on the few that did contact you and
Oh yeah.
saw that you weren't comfortable with what you found.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people out there making their own distribution companies now, and a lot of times they're just like average people that don't necessarily have the connections, but they can make phone calls just like we can. We had one company contact us saying that they wanted to put our movie in movie theaters, but then we found out that they were going to charge us $200 per theater. And then I contacted a couple of the theaters they suggested, and the screening at their theater is only 100 and something. So then you begin to realize, oh, they're not really a distributor that can put your movie in theaters. They're just going to make you pay for their screenings and then put their logo in front of your movie. And then it feels like you're getting theatrical distribution, but it's not. And some of those theaters are AMC theaters. So like it has a certain kind of look. So I don't know, sometimes you have to navigate the world in the context of, okay, you're going to do this or that. But I mean, it's so rare to get any kind of minimum guarantee from a distributor. So then what are you looking for? Well, you're at least looking for eyeballs, right? So like what distributor can put your film on as many platforms as possible, not just Prime. Seems like a lot of people can get their movies on Prime pretty easily. But, getting it on Prime and Apple and Spectrum and all these different places is what Gravitas is able to do. So, and that information is sitting there on their website and their track record. And, I've seen a couple movies in art house theaters too that had a Gravitas logo in front of the movie. So that was another reason why it felt like I've seen these films around.
And when you spoke to your entertainment attorney, did they discourage you from signing for too many years? I know you said you had a 10-year contract.
Yeah, I mean, each distributor is offering 15 at first. And Gravitas was offering 15, and I pushed back to 10. Truthfully, that decision came from a really amazing talk that Joe Swanberg gave at South by Southwest, I believe it was, where he talks about what filmmakers should be looking for in a distribution company. And IFC Midnight sounds like a great company I would love to work with in the future. It sounds like and I love the way they put their DVDs and Blu-rays together. It looks really great. But one big factor is if they're not pushing your movie, then you need to get your movie back as fast as possible. Now, I could have probably pushed for a 5-year agreement, but 10 years sounds nice too. And I am very washed up on shore with building that movie. So it's nice to have it off your hands for a bit.
Sure.
So, but someone sells their movie, right, to a distributor, and it doesn't go theatrical, it doesn't have a big name actor, but then there's filmmakers that are angry that aren't seeing money. And here's what I think. They need to stop being angry. Unless they have real reason to say that a company is doing something criminal, I really think a filmmaker, you're not going to make money on your first movie. You're going to make money once you're making your next movie and your next movie. Because say my next movie ends up being a success and a hit, then at least 1 million filmmakers around the planet are going to go and probably rent the first movie, because that's what I always did. You'd watch a filmmaker and go back and watch their earlier work. So like I told the investors for Clowning, even if that money doesn't suddenly pop up from our first deal with Gravitas, believe me, I'm going to keep making movies. And at some point, Clowning's going to make its money back. But we'll see. The first numbers are coming through soon, so.
What does that mean, washed up ashore? You're just ready to move on to the next project?
Yeah, I mean, with the movies I've made, the 3 features and 36 shorts, producing, writing, directing, editing, sound design, mixing, it's like you come up with the idea. Writing a screenplay is building a mountain. And then you take that screenplay and then you make it into a movie. So then shooting it's building a mountain. And then you got to take the material and detach yourself from the way that it, all the intricacy of building the thing. And then you got to edit the whole mountain and do all the sound design work. And then for me personally, I can't quite tell what to take out of the movie until all the sound design's sitting there. So then you're doing months of work that you're also removing, and so by the time you finish this movie, it's like I'm so tired of looking at it. Like my girlfriend, she said when we met, I wasn't really talking about Clowning, and she said to me, we finally watched it because the movie had come out and she wanted to watch it, and I finally was like, well, let's watch. I want to watch one of these streamers and see what the version looks like, and make sure that it looks good. So we watch it. And she turns to me and she's like, I love this movie. She's like, I meet people who make a 2-minute short video and they think it's the most amazing thing they've ever seen in their lives, and it's totally not very good. And you don't even ever talk about this feature film that you did. But that's because I washed up on shore. And I was very tired of looking at it, talking about it. At some point, like when you're making a feature, I feel like, you could do it within 1 year, but it could take a couple of years of your life. And then it's something you're going to talk about probably forever to some degree. So it's always there. But
what's harder for you, having to tell someone no or hearing the word no when it comes to filmmaking?
Probably hearing the word no. Only because my mind first goes to the standpoint of, how do you know that you can't do it? I don't know why. That's where my mind went. My mind went to a place of someone saying no because they can't visualize the answer or the solution, perhaps, when in truth anything is possible. So I don't think we should be limited by what we see or what we think.
What's the worst rejection you faced with your creativity?
Okay. A rejection doesn't have to be somebody physically rejecting, right? Because a rejection can be just something happening that is like the universe rejecting you. Okay. I set out to make my first feature film called The Monster Within. I got a $5,000 credit card. I think I was 22 at the time. I had a company building me a 10-foot tall spider that would be operated by 3 or 4 different people. My dad, he had purchased this dilapidated apartment building downtown, and I had bought all this furniture, and me and my friends carried all this stuff up, furnished a lot of this apartment building. I blocked out all the windows. I was gonna make this monster movie. It was in a really bad part of Cincinnati, Ohio, though. So we went there on site to actually film the movie, and the first issue happened. And on this particular day, this is interesting because I don't know why I chose one of the most complicated days to start with. We had 3 or 4 different 12 to 14-year-olds who were all dressed up like ghosts and like these goblin kind of looking creatures. My grandmother, my grandma Tony, she was there and was supposed to be a dead person and had a wound on her neck that the makeup artist created as if she'd been choked. And then it was my girlfriend, myself, and my makeup artist and my lead male character that was all going to this building. And the first issue happened. The extension cords couldn't go through the mail slot of the front door for the generator. So in this part of town, it was very unsafe. So we had to keep the front door open. So we turn on this generator. Homeless people start trying to walk into the building. My dad shows up and he's kind of shuffling people out and he's giving people $1 here, $1 there. And suddenly in the middle of, I didn't even shoot one single shot. There's a moment where I had this deep rooted understanding that I had brought all these people into a scenario that I could not control. And it was unsafe. And I would not jeopardize anybody's health to make a film. So I went around the corner from the building, burst into tears by myself, just completely knowing I'm going to cancel this whole movie. And we had just rehearsed for like 30 days with all these actors. Like I had just rehearsed with a bunch of people I casted in this thing in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I came back, shut the whole thing down because I knew I just didn't have the ability to control the environment. And at some point in the shoot, someone would have gotten injured from a homeless person or any kind of, something was going to happen. I could feel it in my gut. And you have to follow those moments of intuition where it tells you. Now, at that moment, I fell into a bit of a depression, taught myself how to play guitar, and then eventually made my first feature film called Marked, which was the one where I took a character and had them act with a bunch of actors and it ended up being a 90 to 100-minute movie. But for me, when I made that film, it was, if I don't make it, then I shouldn't be making movies. So there's so much a part of that. But the monster within became a monster within. And I had a $5,000 credit card that I run up that I had to pay off. And yeah, so that's a rejection that the universe threw in my face.
So it was your heart of darkness, basically, or hearts of...
You know, it was a great film school. It was a great sudden moment of understanding the moral side of bringing people together. If you can't control a space, if you can't keep people safe, then you should not be making that particular movie. You know, or maybe you haven't learned enough to be making movies at that level yet.
So you went back in after you went around the corner and you made the decision.
We're closing shop.
And what did everyone say?
Everyone's always been so positive in my life. I mean, all of those people, they were probably thankful to go home. I bet you at that particular moment, we were supposed to be filming all throughout the daytime. By the time we got there, it was already getting night because I knew it'd be dangerous at night. So that's why I blacked out all the windows. So it's just one of those situations where there's too much going on. I didn't have control over enough of it. But I still ended up filming some stuff in that building at some point for another movie. But yeah, that was an interesting tale to learn.
And did you blame yourself?
You know, I didn't blame myself. I think more what was to blame was just a lack of understanding of how to build a production. You know, I had made all these tiny movies and I was just trying to do something longer. Not even like a feature film. It wasn't in my head that way. It was more of just, I want to entertain my family longer because every holiday I'd bring my short films to show them and we would watch them and laugh. And that was the only point to me doing it. So yeah, so at that point, you know, I also had written this script where there was a 10-foot tall spider and all these other, I'd bitten off so much, I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah.
I mean, I know in the moment it wasn't, but just that it was your sort of introduction to safety on set and biting off more than you could chew, and just circumstances, you know, beyond your control, not
Yeah.
knowing the cord wouldn't fit through the slot.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It was one of those, I mean, you know, thank goodness though too, because at some point, I bet in the middle of filming, someone would have just taken the generator. They probably would have unplugged it and taken it out of the back of the truck, and we'd just be with no power on the 3rd floor in this falling apart apartment building. So there were so many factors. I just kept thinking to myself, you know, these things could happen. And yeah, luckily we pushed away from it though. And it wasn't the first one.
David Fincher said that he didn't know how to create a script. I think you were talking about that. And that he didn't know how to see the big scope of a whole film. He only knew intuitively how to direct a scene or a sequence. And he was in awe of screenwriters and what they were capable of.
Yeah, I believe when he was talking about that, I think it might have been the making of Social Network. And I think it had to do with the intricacies of writing dialogue and the snappy way that opening of Social Network begins, where it's them sitting in a coffee shop and they're going back and forth. And I think he was talking about the idea of filming that for, I believe, 62 takes, or maybe the number's off. It could be a different number of takes, but quite a few takes. And the concept that he can't necessarily sit down and write out a 120-page script, but he can intuitively understand where to place the camera and how to capture the emotions of what's taking place. I can't remember the context in which I was talking about that, but I believe what it would have to do with is just the idea of choosing the right placement of camera and movement versus the emotional stabilities you're trying to harness and capture in performances. And David Fincher is one to watch with the idea of how he's, you know, pushing the camera through so many different shots. I mean, there's something about his execution that is such a David Fincher execution that's so unlike everything else everybody else makes, which is so interesting. But I can't recall where what I was saying that in regards to though. So
Yeah. If you watch The Social Network and then you watch, let's say, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, would you see the same sensibilities? You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
two very, very different films.
oh yeah, very, very, I mean, he barely ever has handheld camera work. His cameras are very situated to whatever it is. If there's movement, if it's connected to a vehicle, it's, you know, the best shot. It seems like his films are executed in a way that they are the best executed films out there. Like, but I mean, maybe that has something to do with him doing so many takes, though. I don't know. And when I say executed, I really don't mean, I don't mean that his choice of how he films something is the best. I just mean that it seems like somehow his crew is executing at a higher level than everybody else's, which has got to be a testament to him, or a testament to doing 60 takes of something. Yeah, I don't know.
Did you do a lot of takes with clowning?
No, we did. I tried to do 3 to 5 if I could. We had so little time. I mean, like the interrogation stuff all through the movie Clowning, we that was 12 pages. We had to shoot all in one day. Yeah, we had to shoot all that in one day because we only had the soundstage for that one single day. Yeah, that whole movie was driving more time than acting in front of the camera, which that's why my next film, or any feature film, I never want to do in less than 30 days. Which to Martin Scorsese, he was talking about how 34 days was like no time. You know, he would not want to do one in less than 60. He said that in an interview I was watching for The Irishman. You know, when he was talking about that movie. And I thought to myself, he said, I can't do a movie in less than 60 days. And we just got done doing this 17-day shoot. And my thoughts were like, man, if I had 30 days, that would have been a completely different movie. But I also believe that restraints guide you to the solution. So I wouldn't have wanted to make clowning any other way than what it was made. I'm extremely proud of what it is. And if it would have had a different amount of money or a different amount of time, it would have been a completely different tale.
And that goes back to the Buddhist saying of work with what you have.
Truly. But also, too, it goes back to the idea of just go make a film. Because as long as you take the camera, get the people, go out into the world, you're going to find a gorgeous way to shoot it. And you're going to get those little miracles that happen. And they only happen if you hit record. If you don't hit record, it never happens.
In hearing this David Fincher quote or paraphrasing of the quote, what are your thoughts on someone at his level saying that he's in awe of screenwriters being able to do what they can do when we see what he does and it looks so effortless?
Well, I would say that that's a master of his craft truly expressing the truth, which is if it's not for the written word, we wouldn't have a movie. You can do a whole film improvisational, for sure. John Cassavetes and plenty of filmmakers have proven that. But you need the written word. You need something to lean on. And like you need the written word generally for investors. Not everybody's Mike Leigh, where Mike Leigh would go to investors with a group of actors and say, this is going to be the subject. Here's the actors. Give us money. And then they'd go off for 5 or 6 months and formulate the characters and make these brilliant films. The truth is that when it comes down to it, you have to understand, or let's say it this way, if you can compartmentalize your abilities and comprehend what you're best at, and then fill the slots with amazing, talented people for the things you're not that great at, then more than likely you will succeed. Because, I mean, it's the same thing that Terry Gilliam said to Quentin Tarantino, where Quentin Tarantino said, your films are so specific and there's such a vision behind them. How do you do that, you know? And Terry told him, you don't have to worry about cinematography or knowing lenses or knowing production design. You just have to have your vision. You just have to have see the thing the way that you see it, whether it's colors, angles, everything, all the pre-visualization methods you can think of. If you're able to go down that path and then you fill all the people around you with the most talented people you can possibly bring together, then they're going to make you look amazing and they're going to bring your vision to fruition. Because you have to have a vision for it to be a vision, right? Because a vision, truly what a vision is the final filter for all the choices. And if somebody doesn't have the vision, then it goes back to what Andrei Tarkovsky said in his book, Sculpting in Time. He says, if the director's not careful, you can become a mere witness to your movie being shot, to your actors acting, to your production designers designing, to, you know, but for him, what Andrei Tarkovsky believed is that the director should be more of a poet, more of an artist, and have their hands dirty in everything constantly. And that's what David Lynch did. He was constantly seen on set, messing with everything, building a lamp for the background of a scene. And, you know, but again, there's different kinds of filmmakers. I don't think David Fincher's building a lamp, but he's choosing the lamp. And therein lies what your real objective is. And the objective is to have a vision.